Tilehurst End podcast
by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End podcast extra in association with the Wokingham paper for today, Thursday the 26th of April. My name is Olly Allen, your host as ever for today's show, and I'm delighted to be joined by the Wokingham paper's Tom Crocker. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, Olly, not too bad, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. And for the first time in podcast extra history, there's a third man on the show for this week, and that is the editor of the Tilehurst End and regular main show guest, Simeon Pickup. How's it going?
I'm very good. I'm delighted to be making some history for the podcast extra.
And the main reason we've got you on, Sim, is because you were the only one of us foolish enough to go up to Hillsborough on Saturday to witness Reading fall to a 3-0 defeat. So you'll be able to provide the most insight on that game. And we'll jump straight into that now. And it was Fernando Forestieri who opened the scoring for the Owls on 34 minutes. George Boyd then doubled the lead soon after the break before Forestieri got his second to round off the scoring 17 minutes from time. Tyler Blackett also picked up what seems to be Reading's obligatory red card in the game now, and many people suggested that this was perhaps our worst performance under Paul Clement. It was obviously our joint heaviest defeat under him, along with the game at Aston Villa. But whilst Villa perhaps obviously, they've been pushing for promotion the entire season, so that defeat you could perhaps say was almost expected. Wednesday had virtually nothing to play for really, but still sort of thrashed us quite handsomely. As someone who was there, Sim, was the performance as bad as the scoreline suggests?
I don't think it reflects the whole game, to be honest. If you look at the second half, then certainly, I guess 2 or 3-0 was about right. Reading losing pretty comfortably because they didn't really trouble the Wednesday goalie anywhere near enough. But on the basis of the first half, particularly the opening half an hour or so before the first goal went in, Reading were probably the better side of the two, actually. I thought we were very comfortable on the ball. We moved it around very well. We looked pretty solid at the back before the pretty sloppy opening goal that we conceded, but at that stage of the game we looked pretty comfortable. Certainly a lot better going forwards than we have done in recent weeks under Clement, where we've not really bothered to get forward much at all. But it was just that final ball in the final third, just creating a real clear-cut chance that we weren't able to do. We were very good at passing the ball back and forth, kind of across the final third, but in terms of playing that final pass and really creating a chance, we just couldn't quite do it.
I think we've got as many goals as red cards under Paul Clement so far, which isn't a great statistic, but clearly showing that attacking is perhaps an element that he needs to improve on. But the defending, indeed, was once again criticised. Obviously, having watched the highlights, certainly for the goals, it seems we could have done a lot better. It looked as though sort of everyone was afraid to close down the man on the ball or put a challenge in, really. And Chris Gunter is one man who's sort of come in for a bit of criticism. And Tom, you put a tweet up this morning about how he's reached 50 games for the season, for the third campaign running, which seems to have attracted quite a few comments from Reading fans, some good, some bad. And I think all three of us are pretty big Chris Gunter fans, so this discussion might be a little bit biased. But what's your view on him, Tom? I think does he not get enough credit that he deserves, or is sort of the criticism fair?
It was quite the reaction to that tweet, actually. Yeah. I wasn't. I know he's a bit of a divisive figure, but yeah, it caught me a bit by surprise. It's still going on now. I think some of the stuff is still coming through from this morning, but I think obviously he's not going to be the perfect right back, and you're not going to get that in the Championship, I don't think. But in terms of consistency, if you can rely on someone, an international class right back, to play 50 games for you every year, I think that's something you can't really be sniffed at. And obviously going forward, he's sometimes a bit suspect, and some obviously closing down crosses is something that has come up again this weekend. And yeah, he's certainly got his faults, but I think if you look through the Championship, there's a few good young right backs coming through. But in terms of a consistent one, I think he's one of the people you really need in your squad. Someone you don't have to worry about injuries or anything, suspension, and he's reliable, and you need people like that in your squad. And yeah, you obviously want some sort of flashy players going forwards, but in terms of defenders, I don't think you can really look too much further. And I think whoever the manager is, they keep picking him, so there must be a reason for that. So yeah, some of the criticism I think is a bit harsh, but yeah, obviously he certainly seems like a divisive figure.
I think reliable and consistent are certainly two words that you would definitely associate with Chris Gunter. I mean, he's not terrible. He's very much a steady player. I'll sort of play devil's advocate by saying he's played 50 times this season, but only 6 times has he been given above 6 on our player rating. So that sort of gives you the indication that he is reliable, but he's not spectacular on the right hand side. I think probably a lot of fans sort of associate Gunter with his last 5 years or so of sort of mediocrity. So, I mean, perhaps excluding last season, but I'd be hesitant to sort of potentially agree. I think he's fine for where we are now, but if we're pushing near the top of the Championship, would I want him as my first choice right back? Perhaps not. Sim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you've got it quite right. He's obviously not going to be. He's not one of the very top right backs in the division. If he was, then he probably wouldn't still be at Reading, to be honest. But if you're looking for long-term, consistent, dedicated servants for the club, then you can't really look too much further than Chris Gunter, someone who turned down better money at Middlesbrough in the summer to stay here on presumably not as good financial terms. It's the kind of stuff that is quite easy to gloss over when you look at some of the more glamorous right backs, some of the really good attacking, exciting right backs that you see in football nowadays. But it's a very underrated, very underappreciated skill to just be consistent, to put in a good performance week in, week out. And yeah, he's not going to get the headlines. He's not going to really come up with a really good assist or a really good goal, but it's about what he can offer to the club on the whole, in general, rather than just those little moments that really stand out. And I'm to be honest, I'm delighted that we have a player who's been as loyal as he is, that has been dedicated to the club over the last couple of years. And considering how inconsistent the club has been behind the scenes over the last couple of years, he's been a man of consistency. He's been someone to appreciate and be glad that he's at your club.
I think Gunter is undoubtedly one of the players who sort of splits the fan base the most. I'm sure we could sit here and debate his role at the club all night, but we will move over onto the other side of the defence to discuss Tyler Blackett, who of course picked up Reading's fourth red card in 6 games, meaning as I mentioned earlier, it's as many goals as it is red cards for Reading under Paul Clement so far. Blackett was sent off in the 76th minute at Hillsborough for lashing out at a Wednesday player off the ball. I mean, he's not headbutted him or anything, or forcefully shoved him over. I think he's given him a little kick to try and trip him up. So, he did certainly lose his head in that moment. It didn't really help his cause. Obviously, he's been a player who's never been hugely popular with Reading players, and it does mean that he'll miss the remainder of the season. Some people suggesting that this perhaps means that he might not play for Reading again. Do you think Blackett is a player the club will look to offload in the summer, Tom?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, because obviously you got Omar Richards coming through, but I say Blackett has been, you'd say, first choice under Paul Clement, I think, if you look at the game so far. But yeah, the weekend you look at, I think I watched the sort of 12-minute highlight package, and he was at fault, or he's not at fault, but they went down his side for a couple of the goals, I think, and yeah, so that red card is just stupid, really. 3-0 down, you already got Bakuna suspended, and just another man missing now for the next game as well. And yeah, he's just lashed out, petulant, really, and you don't really know what's going through his head, and it'll be something that Paul Clement, I'm sure, won't be happy about. And over the summer, he's someone that they'll be looking at, because obviously I don't think he's necessarily a definite starter. You hopefully have a beta coming back in as well, and you wonder where that leaves Blackett. So to write him off just yet might be a little bit harsh. I think he has improved generally since Clement's come in. But yeah, the weekend was certainly one to forget for him, I think. But yeah, he's as like you say, the fans haven't really taken to him this year either. So it'd be an interesting one to keep an eye on over the summer, I think.
I think in terms of left back side, I think Jordan Abita, providing that he can get back fit all right, and Omar Richards would sort of do me fine. I mean, obviously Blackett can, of course, play at centre back as well, which might sort of be in his favour of keeping him at the club. I'm not necessarily desperate to see him stay. So me and Tom have sort of talked about the red cards in recent weeks. What's your take on the situation? Does it sort of worry you that Reading have picked up so many red cards, or is it sort of an anomaly sort of as we get towards the end of the season?
It's bizarre, really. I'm trying to work out if it's kind of too much passion or just maybe them losing their heads in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really compare each of the red cards to each other, because obviously they all come in different situations. But I guess if you look at, say, the Bakuna red card and the Blackett red card, ones where Reading are losing very late on in the game, and it just seems like frustration that they've really kind of, their emotions have boiled over. That Blackett one on Saturday, I kind of watched it in real time. I haven't seen it back as a highlight yet, but it just seemed in real time that he was just so frustrated, that he was so kind of taken over by the situation, and just couldn't keep his head at the time. Just a stupid little kick. It wasn't anything particularly malicious or aggressive. He wasn't trying to hurt the player. It's just lashing out that he just couldn't. It's weird. It's just it's almost as if his head just went, and you kind of wonder why a professional footballer is doing that. But then again, you look at the constant criticism he gets on social media, a lot of it fair, to be honest, but the constant negativity that he gets, and he must be feeling himself. And then when you're in a situation like that, 3-0 down away from home, right at the end of the game, stupid decision like that, perhaps it's likely to happen with someone like Blackett, who's probably not in a great place psychologically.
I think that probably is. I think he's probably more annoyed at himself more than anything else. Obviously, you mentioned we were 3-0 down at the time, and as Tom said, a couple of goals sort of came down his side, so he's probably more annoyed at himself more than anything. And certainly nothing malicious, as you said, in that tackle. Moving on then, looking at the table, and Sunderland became the first team to be officially relegated from the Championship at the weekend, as they lost 2-1 to Burton, with the Brewers themselves moving on to 38 points in 23rd. It puts them level with Barnsley, who lost 2-1 to Leeds, but they do, of course, have that game in hand on Tuesday, so that may well have been played by the time you're listening to this. But Bolton look to be the team most in danger in 21st after they lost 4-0 to champions Wolves, whilst Reading and Birmingham sit 5 points clear at the time of recording, with the Blues having beaten Sheffield United 2-1. With 2 games to go then, chaps, how are the nerves? Do you think we'll make it over the line soon?
I think it's hard to tell, really. That Ipswich game coming up on Saturday, it's almost as if we're putting too much pressure on it. I know it's easy to say, just get the win and we'll stay up and we should be fine, but we've been here so many times before when it's just been a case of Reading getting a win and they'll be fine. You look back to, say, the Burnley game at home a couple of years ago, just get the win and we'll get into the playoffs. Even if we get a draw, we might be fine. And we've still found a way to disappoint ourselves in the end. So I don't think we're quite out of the woods yet. There's still a particularly unlikely scenario where we go down, but however unlikely, it's still possible. So I guess on Saturday it's that first half, it's that first goal. If Reading can get ahead in the first 45 and dictate how the game's going to go, then they should be fine, particularly against an Ipswich side that doesn't have a manager, is on bad form, and is basically going to view it as a dead rubber, probably.
Yep.
It's a potential banana skin for sure.
Looking at the remaining fixtures, of course we have Ipswich at home and then Cardiff away. Birmingham have QPR away and then Fulham at home. Barnsley have that game in hand over Forest on Tuesday before facing Brentford at home and then Derby away. Whilst Bolton and Burton face off in what's set to be a crucial game this coming weekend before they face Forest and Preston, respectively, on the final day. Might it even be just a point that might do it for Reading, Tom?
Yeah, I think it looks like they're probably going to stay up, and it's going to be down to everyone else failing to catch them up, really. They've been falling over the line for the last few weeks, and like you say, a fat couple of them playing each other, and I think all those teams down there have got at least one winnable game in there, but Reading have still got that little cushion, so they could lose both and stay up quite conceivably. But I think last year 51 points went down, and they're only on 43, so they've got a bit fortunate in that sense. But I think the weekend is a bit of a concern though. So playing a team with nothing to play for, and it only looked like one team had the desire to win that game, really, when you look back at the goals and the chances. Reading jogging around, not closing the ball down, and you have to wonder if they think that they're pretty much safe already as well. And obviously they say all the right things, but I felt a bit sorry for the fans going up there at the weekend. It just looked like they were going through the motions a little bit at times, and you hope that the home form has been better. That's one saving grace, really, that you'd hope that in front of a decent home crowd on Saturday they might be able to get, say, a win on Saturday, and that'll get them over the line. And yeah, it's certainly a winnable game, and I think, like I say, that one win will do it. But it's certainly not been they're certainly falling over the line, I think, rather than flying over it. So it's more down to the other teams failing to pick up the points, I think, really. Yeah,
I mean, I am actually quite unusually optimistic about the situation. I think it might even go as far as say that even if Reading lose both of their final 2 games, that they should just about survive. And that's purely because of what you mentioned there, Tom. I think it's all about the team sort of below them picking up the points, and Barnsley and Bolton especially don't look too capable of doing that right now. And I think, of course, it could all change if Barnsley get the win against Forest on Tuesday, of course. And if it is just one more point or one more win that Reading need, it does seem likely that will come against Ipswich, as discussed this weekend. And we'll look ahead to that one now. And on the face of it, with Ipswich shouldn't provide too much of a test, having won just once in 9 games and coming into this game off the back of a 4-0 defeat to Aston Villa at the weekend. And they're under the temporary charge of Brian Klug after Mick McCarthy quit on the spot after the game against Barnsley early in the month, and they're floating sort of 14th in mid-table. So on the face of it, they have very little to play for, but we did say that about Sheffield Wednesday last weekend. So take nothing for granted whatsoever at all. And Ipswich did, of course, also beat us 2-0 at Portman Road just before Christmas. Sim, how much of a challenge do you sort of see Ipswich being at the Mazdad? Obviously, of course, Reading still unbeaten at home under Paul Clement as well.
I think it all just depends on how we start the game, to be honest. Yeah. If Ipswich are able to get that first goal, then they're going to be up for it. They're not going to want to lose a game any more than they would earlier on in the season. But if we can get that first goal, then hopefully they should just capitulate and just not have that fight to get back into the game. It's always a banana skin going up against a side that you feel that you should beat, and it presents a particularly tough mental challenge for your own players when they're going to be looking at it as a game that they really should win, that they shouldn't have too many problems in. So it's up to Clement to kind of really spur them on and get them motivated and really make it sink in that they need to get that win. They need to play well if they're to get anything out of it, just the same as any other match.
I mean, you would hope that if Reading got the first goal, then the game would perhaps go the same way as the QPR, the Preston game, as opposed to the Sunderland game where they actually came close to losing it. In terms of Ipswich, Martin Waghorn's the main goal threat with 14 to his name this season, as well as 8 assists, but only 4 of those have come since the turn of the year. Bertrand Chelina on loan from Man City is the sort of the really only other main threat, but scored 8 goals and got 1 assist this season. But again, he hasn't scored since January. I mean, it's not a squad that has that many star names at all. I think obviously Bartosz Białkowski in goal is quite a decent goalkeeper for this level, and I think some people might even argue could have been in the team of the season over John Ruddy. But overall, I think you have to commend sort of the work that Mick McCarthy did over the sort of the course of 6 years or so. They finished in the top half on 3 occasions, making the playoffs once. But you just wonder, Tom, whether Brian Clough sort of will be able to sort of really be able to motivate the squad for these final 2 games of the campaign.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big question. Like I say, I think they've been working on a tight budget, and they go through. There's no real maybe standout players, but they work well as a team. So when the manager goes, the question is do they continue with that? I mean, they lost 4-0 at home last week, and they got a red card in that one as well. So you have to say you couldn't really handpick a better game for Reading at home against a team of 1 win and 9 in mid-table. So it's in their hands to get the job done. But I think Sim hit the nail on the head, really. It's down to Paul Clement to drum into the players that they really do need to go and get that win. It's not, well, it might end up just happening for them, but you can't really take that risk. And yeah, if they lose this one and go, there's every chance that you go into the final game of the season still needing something to be sure, and that could be a promotion party at Cardiff, and that's definitely not what you want. So this is the week they've got to get the points, go into that final game with the job done, and then into the summer to regroup. But yeah, they've got to find a way to perform a lot better this weekend than they did last week, and try and sort of harness that spirit they've had in some of the home games recently. Although, like you say, the Sunderland one was far from perfect as well. They could have lost that one, and now they've got 2 suspensions to deal with as well. And yeah, I think a good start will be vital, because if they go behind and then suddenly there's going to be nerves around the stadium again, I think people might realise that they are still well in this relegation battle. So yeah, it's a good start. And then, like you say, hopefully Ipswich, they've got very little to play for, no manager, and you would like to think if they got an early goal that Reading that they'll be able to see it out fairly comfortably, but nothing seems to be that comfortable for a long time now.
Yep. As for Reading, then, I mean, you would expect that the 3-0 defeat at Hillsborough would sort of prompt Paul Clement to make a few changes, and obviously Tyler Blackett will drop out anyway through suspension, and I suspect probably replaced by Omar Richards. Similar, any sort of obvious changes you'd like to see happen? I think there's not an awful lot of options, but the likes of Dave Edwards, Pelle Clement, Chris Martin, or Jan Kermingen could all be options to sort of come into the side.
Well, annoyingly, there's not really too many different options that we've got in order to change things up at the moment. What I'd really be hoping to see us do is bring in someone to give one of Barrow or Aluka a rest, because they've been pretty much playing every minute for every game over the last couple of months, because we don't have any other wingers at all. Apparently, McCleary's not in. Harriet's a long-term injury. Letting go of Popper and Behrens without bringing someone else in was a couple of odd decisions. So it puts a lot of pressure. It puts a lot of fatigue onto them. And it means don't really have anyone else to bring in, unless you're thinking about, say, Pelle Clement coming in as a winger, perhaps in place of Sonny Aluko, there's not too much else. The only other thing that I can really think of is perhaps trading out Bodvarsson, because he's very good, I think, away from home and in those big games where you really want someone to make the runs in at the channels, to hold the ball up. But in terms of making a difference in the final third, of making something happen in the box, he's not quite as good as some of Reading's other strikers. I know he's been much maligned in the couple of months that he's been here, but Chris Martin is, at the end of the day, a very good goal scorer. Reading haven't been able to build to his strengths and really kind of get him firing, but I still think that he could be useful, maybe putting him on at the end of a game or perhaps even starting him. It would take a lot of tactical thought to really work out how to get Reading playing off him and give him those opportunities that he needs to score. But if he does get a good opportunity to score, to be honest, I back him more than a lot of other Reading players.
I think that position out wide is certainly a very odd one. I think if you said at the start of the season that would probably be one of our strongest positions, but now, obviously, as you mentioned there, with the injuries to Harriott and McCleary and the sales of Popper and Behrens, it's certainly a very weak position. And Chris Martin up front, I think he's got, is it 1 goal so far for Reading against Middlesbrough? And also Jan Kerming as well came off the bench to score against Sunderland at home, so he could be an option as well. Could this weekend also see the return of some long-term absentees too as well, Tom? Joseph Mendes seems to suggest that he travelled with the squad last weekend despite not featuring in the 18, whilst Tommy Elphick, might he also make a rare appearance perhaps?
Yeah, I think Mendes went up there and did some of the sort of warm-down training stuff after the game, so he's back involved, and it's just to say you could be putting him on the bench, but that would mean dropping out Kermagant or Martin. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure they really do that. I don't think he'll make too many changes to the side, really. I think, I said Tommy Elphick's been training as well, so he could come in. But like we said last week, you'd be surprised to see him start a game out of nowhere, really. So I think you're going to have to go with what you've got, really. I think obviously Richards will come in at left back and possibly Edwards in for Joey Vandenberg again, and go with the team that played against Sunderland possibly, and look to it that way. I mean, he doesn't seem to particularly want to play Chris Martin all that much, and I can't see him changing the wingers, really, just like we say, there's no real options to do it. So they've had a week to recover. You'd like to think that they'll be able to go again at the weekend, and yeah, I think it'll be pretty similar to the team that played in the last couple of weeks, really, rather than bring anyone new in, I don't think.
It does sort of leave Paul McShane and Callum Harriott as the only remaining injured due. We haven't mentioned, obviously, as well the likes of Amabita and McCleary, who are out for a fair while. I'll ask you the same as I seem to do every single week, Tom, but is there an update on whether either of those two will sort of be seen in Reading colours again this season, McShane or Harriott?
I think McShane, there is a small possibility, but obviously his time's quickly running out, and it's Callum Harriott hasn't played for it's probably a year and a half, I think, so the chance of him, I think, is next to zero that he'll play now for the first team this season. And yeah, McShane, it is possible, but like you say, I think he's a bit further behind Elphick now. I think there was a stage when he was a bit closer, but I think he's still doing sort of individual work, so I don't think I can't see him certainly either of them, any of the injured players, really starting a game anytime soon. It's just going to be, they've been out such a long time that it'll be a bit of a risk. And obviously, if the team's already safe, then maybe they might try and give them a few minutes. But yeah, for this weekend, I think it's very much going to be a case of who's been playing rather than, and then those guys are just going to have to try and get back over the summer, sadly now.
I'll ask you about Callum Harriott, Sim. Obviously, as Tom mentioned there, he's not played for a year and a half. I think he has got 1 year left on his contract after this one, but do you think perhaps a fresh start might be beneficial for him next season, perhaps moving away? Or, I mean, as we mentioned, Reading's wing options aren't that strong. Or do you think there is a place for him next season, Callum Harriott?
Yeah, absolutely. As this season has shown, particularly the last couple of months, you need options out wide. So even if he's not starting regularly, even if he's not playing regularly at all, you still want that option. You still want strength in depth. And he does offer that directness, that pace, that a lot of other players don't really. And even on a couple of occasions last season, he showed that he's got a really good finish on him. I think of the Norwich goal at home, brace against, I think, MK Dons it was in the League Cup. He's certainly got an eye for goal. He's certainly got that confidence and that directness that you want from your wingers. Certainly something we haven't seen from, say, Sonny Aluko this season. He's got that confidence that you really want, at least as an option in the squad. So I don't really see any reason why he can't be here next season. And And yeah, I don't think we've really got anything to lose. He hasn't proved anything over the last year and a half with him being out injured, so I can't see Reading being able to get a huge amount of money for him if we were to sell him or let him go. So I guess his potential is higher than his resale value. So just keep him around the squad next season, give him a chance to come back into first team contention, hopefully without the pressure of having to bring him back. If we can get some other wingers back into the fold as well, perhaps Adrian Popper if Clement wants to look at him, Yaku Mate if he comes back from France. But yeah, hopefully see a couple of them back in first team contention next season.
Yep. Predictions wise then, obviously Mark is away, so I have no confirmation of the updated leaderboard, but you went for a draw, Tom, against Sheffield Wednesday, so it'll be interesting to see what Westy went for and see if he's overtaken you or not. But we are recording this on Monday evening, so you're more than welcome to sort of change your prediction between now and the weekend. But right now, what are you going to go for against Ipswich?
I don't know why. I keep going for 2-0 wins, and I remember the last time Reading won a game by more than one goal, but I'm going to go for 2-0 again, just because, like I say, it's a home game against a team that they should fancy their chances against. So I'll stick with 2-0 on the law of averages. They should get one eventually, so I'll go for that.
Timmy, you as confident?
I'm not, to be honest. It's one of those games that we should win, and because you should be confident, I'm not confident. If that makes sense. It'd just be so Reading-y to not win on Saturday, and my gut is telling me a particularly annoying 1-1 draw that doesn't really give us much satisfaction going into the final day of the season.
It may be enough, a 1-1 draw, but I think I'm going to say we're going to scrape it 1-0 in similar fashion to sort of against QPR and Preston, and a result that will all but confirm survival. And I think a win would in fact definitely secure survival, full stop, if Barnsley fail to beat Nottingham Forest on Tuesday night. But as we've been saying for weeks, we don't want to go to Cardiff needing a point or three, as it's looking like they'll need something in the race for automatic promotion. So hopefully we can get the job done this weekend and then enjoy Inflatables Day in South Wales. And it all sounds far too straightforward, doesn't it, chaps?
Yeah, like you say, it's just get the win and that's job done. We can go into the summer happy. But it's been a struggle for the last few months, so I'm sure it'll be a struggle pretty much all the way to the end now.
As we come towards the end of the show, then, what can we look forward to on the Wokingham paper in the next few days, Tom?
So it's like I say, we've got a few days without a game, another week free, but we'll have a build up towards the weekend, and Sim's column went up today actually about the player of the season, which I presume will be announced on Saturday, as it usually is for the last home game. Not a great selection of choice this year, but that's up now on Wokingham today, and on my Twitter I put it up, Tom J. Crocker.
Fantastic stuff. Sim, can you give us a bit of a tease of who's included in that?
I can tell you that the top three may or may not include Sonny Aluko and Tyler Blackett. I'll let you I'll let you work out if that one's true or not. What I will say is that I've included another section on most improved player across the season. I'm not going to tell you who my player of the season was, just to give you a bit of suspense, just to entice you into reading that article on the Wokingham paper. But my most improved player across the season was Pelly Clement, actually. Looking at how rough a couple of months that he had over the first couple of months of his time in England, but he's, I think, really got accustomed to the pace of the English game as the season's gone on, and I think he could look a lot like a first team player next season or thereabouts.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much, Sim, for popping on for the first ever 3-man podcast extra.
That's quite all right. Good to be part of history.
And thanks as ever to Tom for joining me once again this week as well.
No problem. Cheers, Olly.
No worries at all. And of course, stay tuned to the Tilehurst End throughout the week for full build-up to the Ipswich game, as well as our report on player ratings after it as well, hopefully with survival in the bag. A quick word too on a special podcast that went out earlier in the week. So I spoke to Sam Stevenson, who's one of the key figures in the group that's been in the South Stand for the last 2 games, trying to boost the atmosphere. We talked about where the idea came from, how far it can go, and answered any questions that you had regarding the initiative. I think they're aiming for their biggest number of fans yet at the weekend, so it's great to see that one growing. Mark will return from his holidays next week to host a main show, looking back on the Ipswich game and taking your questions in the mailbag before myself and Tom will be back next Thursday or Friday to preview game 46 of 46 in the Championship this season, as Reading travel to High Flyers Cardiff on the final day. Until then, though, thank you very much for listening to today's show, and come on yours.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.